Today, we are counting down the top 10 most valuable DC comics of the year 1960. These are all very expensive, very major key and historical books. Starting with number 10 is Flash 112. This is the first appearance of the Elongated Man. This issue features Carmen Infantino cover and interior art. This is technically issue number 8 as it was relaunched, starting with the old numbering with 105 last year. This is the 11th most valuable DC early 60s key first appearance book. Print run estimated at 298,000 copies. It's the number 10 book of the year, also 27th most valuable DC comic of the entire decade of the 1960s. On the CG census, you can see that demand has been really growing for Flash early issues. We now have 230 copies graded by CGC. There are 6 super high grade copies, 9.0 or higher. Heritage Auctions has sold 79 copies in the last 2 decades of this 10-cent cover price book. Using the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, we can look year by year and see the growth in all conditions from a low 2.0 grade up to a 9.2. These are for raw copies. You'll see the book has had nice, slow but steady growth every year and is now a $2,600 book in 9.2 in the Overstreet Price Guide. On the census, the highest graded copies existing are a 9.4 and a 9.2. The number 9 book of the year is Star-Spangled War Stories number 90. Not too many war books make the top 10 of a year, but this one definitely does, as the War That Time Forgot dinosaur series began in this issue and would have a very lengthy run. This series ranks number 9 of the book ranks number 9 of the year, and it's the 24th most valuable book of the decade. And this was a series created by Robert Kanigher, Ross Andrew, and Mike Esposito. On the census, we see typical that war-related comic books are a lot harder to find, especially in high grade. We have only 78 copies graded at all. There are 0 high-grade copies of this book on the census. Heritage has only sold 26 copies. Classic tank and dinosaur cover. In the Overstreet Price Guide, the book has had nice steady growth every year, and even in low grade, it is now a $100 book and reaching $2,800 in 9.2. On the census, the highest graded copies are at 8.5 and 6 copies grading 8.0. Number 8 of the year is another war title. This time it's Our Army at War, number 91. This is the 11th Sergeant Rock related issue and the 9th appearance of Sergeant Rock. It's the 2nd issue of the 1960s, and it's Sergeant Rock's 4th cover appearance on this dime comic. And this was an all Sergeant Rock issue. So this one is highly in demand. Ranks 8th of the year for DC and 17th of the decade. It's also the 8th most valuable DC war comic ever. Print run estimated at 172,000 copies. Again, war copies very scarce on the census, only 68 copies graded. There are 2 high-grade copies, and Heritage has sold only 14 or 22 of this book. And using the Overstreet Price Guide, now that this is a pricey war issue, it's actually kind of been stalling in the last few years. It's met some resistance with the high price tag. It's now a $3,450 book. On the census, there are 2 9.0s and 3 8.5s. Number 7 of the year, Showcase number 24. This is the 3rd Silver Age appearance of Green Lantern, better known as Hal Jordan. This book features Gil Kane cover and art. Print run estimated at 213,000 copies. Number 7 of the year, but 12th most valuable of the entire decade. And lots of demand for this book. On the census, it's quickly jumping up. Now there are 324 copies, 7 high-grade copies. Heritage has sold 112 of these books. In the Overstreet Price Guide, again, it's been a little slow in the past decade, it's just slowly sneaking up. And you can see it's now a $4,900 book. On the census, there are 7 9.0s and 7 8.5s. Number 6 of the year is Braven the Bold, number 30. This is the third appearance of the Justice League of America, who had a tryout in this series 3 issues in a row. This is the final issue before they would get their own ongoing series. And you have to remember, at this time, there hadn't been a DC superhero team in almost a decade. So younger readers, this was the first time they'd ever seen a superhero team. And this is number 6 of the year and number 9 most valuable DC comic of the decade. So this top 6 now are really major league books, all ranking top 10 of the decade for most valuable books. On the census, 452 copies graded, 7 high-grade copies. Heritage has sold 147. Got all the teammates here. And in the Overstreet Price Guide, it had also stalled for a few years, but now it's starting to make its way back up again. $5,700 book. On the census, there is a 9.4 and 4 9.2s. Next on our list is Braven the Bold 29. This is the second appearance of the Justice League of America. This has a robot cover by Mike Skews and Murphy Anderson. And it's sort of a homage cover to All-Star 43 with the Justice Society. Print run estimated 214,000 copies, ranks 5th of the year and 7th of the decade. 466 copies graded by CGC, only 7 high-grade copies, 159 sold by Heritage in 2 decades. In the Overstreet Price Guide, a major correction just this year, they have lowered the prices in all grades except 9.2 and higher, which actually had a bump up. So this book has definitely, again, had some resistance. DC books just happen to be going through a phase right now where they're not super in demand. People are focusing on collecting Marvel 60s books. But again, in the future, this may turn around. There is 1 9.4 and 6 9.0s on the census. Number 4 of the year is Flash 110. This is the 6th issue of the series since it was relaunched with number 105. This is a major key. The first appearance of Kid Flash, Wally West, and Wally would later become The Flash. This is also the first appearance of the villain Weather Wizard. Carmen Infantino cover and artwork. Number 4 of the year and number 5 of the decade. It's the third most valuable DC early 60s first appearance book. Print run estimated at 298,000 copies. On the census, the numbers are really growing fast. 496 copies graded now, 13 high-grade copies. Heritage has sold 103. The Overstreet Price Guide shows nice steady growth on this book every single year. This book has not had any resistance ever, and is now an $8,200 book. On the census, there are 4 9.2s and 9 9.0s. One of the more common books on our list. Number 3 of the year is the new relaunch of Green Lantern, number 1. Green Lantern is back with his own ongoing series for the first time since the 1940s. Gil Kane cover art in this issue. It's the number 3 book of the year and the number 3 book of the decade. This top 3 we're going to see right now are the DC books to own of the 1960s. Print run estimated at 255,000 copies. Census is really growing on this one. Over 1,000 copies graded, including 23 high-grade copies out there. And Heritage has sold over 165 copies. But in the Overstreet Price Guide, a lot of resistance for prices because this already is a very pricey book. So for the last decade, it has had very little movement in lower grades, but it has been sneaking up. Now an $18,000 book in 9.2 for raw copies. On the census, we have 9.6 and 2 9.4s. Number 2 of the year, very important book, Justice League of America, number 1. After appearing in Braven the Bold for 3 issues, DC gave them their own series. This was the first DC superhero team book in a decade, and the popularity of this book would make Stan Lee over at Marvel want to cash in on this trend, creating the Fantastic Four the next year. This premiere issue features the team of Aquaman, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, John Johns, Martian Manhunter, Superman, and Wonder Woman battling Despero. in his first appearance. We have a Murphy Anderson cover and Mike Sikowski interior art. Print run estimated at 335,000 copies. #2 book of the year and #2 book of the decade. Again, very popular on the census. 1,200 copies graded with 15 high-grade copies on the census. Heritage has sold 287 copies of this chess cover. The Overstreet Price Guide has had a little bit of ups and downs on this book over the years, again, due to being so pricey. You'll see that back in 2012, there's a big major price correction in lower grades. And then it's been pretty steady since then. It's now a $30,000 book in 9.2, but up to $590 even in low grade for a copy of this book. On the census, there are 2 9.6s and 2 9.4s, bringing us to the #1 DC comic of 1960, and in fact, the most important DC comic of the entire decade, Braven the Bold 28, featuring the first appearance of the Justice League of America. It's also the first appearance of the villain Starro and Snapper Carr, and it's the 4th appearance of the Silver Age Green Lantern, even predating Green Lantern #1. Print run estimated 214,000 copies. On the census, again, growing fairly steady year by year. 1,100 copies graded now, 15 high-grade copies. Heritage has sold 230 of this iconic 10-cent comic book. Using the Overstreet Price Guide, again, a lot of resistance in lower grades because it's such an expensive book. It's been stalled at $1,400 for the last 5 years in lower grades. But high grade keeps sneaking up. However, it's stalled this year at $92,000 for a high grade copy. On the census, we have a 9.6 and a 9.4. Now let's compare these top 10 books on the CG census just to see how many copies are graded compared to each other. And we find the book with the most copies graded is actually Justice League of America #1 with 1,207 copies, followed by Braven the Bold 28 and Green Lantern #1. Those are the 3 big books. But some of the war comics are still very low in the census. Our Army at War 91 has only 68 copies graded. Now, miraculously, we found that Braven the Bold 28 actually has a 9.6, as does Green Lantern #1. Otherwise, after that, there's a few books on the list with 9.4s or 9.2s. And the rarest book on the list is Star-Spangled War Stories 90, with only one 8.5 ranking as the highest book. The top 10 DC books of the year. We do this series every week, teaching the history of comics. Please subscribe to this channel, and thanks for watching.